Hello and welcome to SATV News. I'm Scott Craig with an update of our top stories. Hundreds continue their protest in Dhaka, calling for Mollah death sentence. Jamaat continues a strike for a second day with sporadic violence across the country. And a powerful earthquake triggers a tsunami hitting the Solomon Islands. Straight to our top story. Demonstrations have continued at Dhaka's Shahbag intersection, calling for Qadir Mollah to have been sentenced to death rather than life in prison. Protesters began gathering yesterday evening after the International Crimes Tribunal found Mollah guilty of crimes against humanity committed during the 1971 Independence War. Crowds gathered with many singing patriotic songs and chanting slogans rejecting Mollah's sentence. There were effigies of Jamaat leaders currently standing trial on charges of crimes against humanity. There's been widespread public anger at the sentencing, with large groups of students, activists and members of the general public expressing support for the protest, with some protesters saying they plan to continue until Mollah is sentenced to death. Meanwhile, Jamaat continued its countrywide strike for the second day in a row. There have been reports of sporadic violence amid the heavy presence of law enforcement forces. Here in Dhaka, a rickshaw puller was hurt in a cocktail bomb explosion in Polton, across the street from the Diganto TV channel office. At Matuwal near Jattabari, strikers began to vandalize a BRTC bus. It quickly took off, dragging a motorcycle behind it. At Bangla Motor, police fired shots to disperse demonstrators. In Naranjganj, police fired rubber bullets after clashes broke out. 10 people are reported to have been injured there. In Chittagong, strike action went ahead, but there were no reports of serious violence in today's events there. In Tuesday's strike, 4 people, including a university student, died there. In Khulna, a police vehicle was attacked. 13 people were reported to have been injured in clashes there. Clashes also took place in other parts of the country, including Rajshahi, Ghazipur, Shirajganj, where 15 people were injured, and in Sylhet. Well, for some analysis of the sentence and the public reaction to it, I'm joined in the studio by Tapas K. Bol. He's a barrister and a prosecutor at the International Crimes Tribunal. Mr. Bol, welcome to SATV. First of all, let me ask you, what is your reaction to the sentence?
As a prosecutor, my reaction is that I am frustrated with the judgment. In a very short sentence, we wanted more. We wanted the convict for death penalty.
Let me ask you simply why.
This is because, you see, if you see the previous judgment of Bachu Rajakar and if you compare with this one, there are evidence in front of the tribunal to show that this convict has committed more heinous crime than the previous one. And they have agreed that. And you see, this is the national tribunal, and under the National Tribunal, National Law of Penal Code, the punishment for this sort of crime is death penalty.
Nobody would doubt the gravity and the severity of the crimes which he was convicted of. There are obviously very dramatic scenes out in the streets in Dhaka here with members of the public expressing their dissatisfaction with that. But this also goes right to the heart of the way that justice is administered. On the one hand, people say they want the tribunal to be independent. The tribunal hears evidence. It issues a judgment and passes a sentence. Then people say, well, we don't like the sentence. So can you have both? Can you have an independent tribunal or an independent tribunal that reacts to public opinion? Is it possible?
Actually, the tribunal is independent, first of all, and the verdict is pronounced. So right at this moment, the tribunal cannot do anything, but the government, you see, there is a single charge against which he was found not guilty. The government can go with it to the appellate division as under the International Crimes Tribunal Act. And also I would like to say that under the International Crimes Tribunal Act, if you read section 20 and subsection 1 and 2, especially subsection 2, you'll see that the death penalty is the first choice, and that's the people's mandate for these sort of criminals who committed the most heinous crime of the century.
It raises an interesting question in this case because, as you say, if it's as clear-cut as that, there were 3 judges in this case who all ruled unanimously. Why do you think that was?
The reason, the reason they have given in the judgment is that the gravity of the offence and the degree of responsibility of the offender, they took that into consideration for this sort of verdict, for verdicting life imprisonment. But I would say that even though it was unanimous, they have misread or misconceived some of the evidences put in front of them. There were evidence that, and they have agreed that all the charges were established beyond reasonable doubt.
I think 5 of 6 charges
Yeah, exactly.
he was convicted of.
Yeah.
6 he wasn't.
No, number 4, he was found not guilty.
Right, that's what I mean. He was found guilty of 5 of the 6 charges he faced. In terms of the tribunal itself, should a tribunal like this have to take into account public opinion?
First of all, I would say this tribunal was a popular mandate. For last 41 years, people wanted this tribunal to take place. These people, these perpetrators, to take under custody and tried before a court. So you see, when the creation of this very tribunal is by the people, then it should not ignore the popular mandate. It should voice what people want.
But that again raises a question because it goes back to my earlier question about a judicial, the court of law versus the court of public opinion are 2 different things, aren't they?
They are, but you see, popular demand is that even if it is a normal criminal, he should be tried, isn't it? And he should be punished. So every criminal court, even if you say about criminal jurisprudence, it is a creation of popular want. So judgment or trying a person before a court, it is always a popular demand, and the court should just try whether sufficient evidence is in front of them and then give the highest punishment. You see, there is no other alternative. Under this law, the evidences put in front of them was enough, and they have agreed unanimously, and they should have given the highest punishment.
I'm afraid we're out of time. We have to leave it there. But Tapas Cable, prosecutor at the International Crimes Tribunal, thank you very much for coming into the studio to join me.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We're taking a short break now, but still to come ahead on the program. Iran's president gets a generally warm welcome in Cairo, but not from everyone. And the World Bank writes off hundreds of millions of dollars of debt for Myanmar, hoping to kickstart the economy. Welcome back. You're with SATV. Time for a recap of our top story. Large protests have continued in Dhaka, calling for the death sentence in the Qadir Mollah war crimes case. A tsunami has hit the Solomon Islands after an earthquake measuring 8 on the Richter scale. At least 4 people are reported to have been killed. Islands officials say that waves traveled at least 500 meters inland, leaving homes and buildings destroyed. The Solomon Islands are part of what's called the Ring of Fire, a seismically active area around the Pacific Basin. Authorities have since cancelled the tsunami alert, believing the worst to be over, though a number of aftershocks are still being felt, with one magnitude 6 recorded. At least one protester has been arrested for throwing a shoe at Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad during a visit to a mosque in Egypt's capital on Tuesday. The shoe didn't appear to hit Ahmadinejad, but the president's security team quickly moved him. The man was quickly arrested by police at the scene. In the Arab world, throwing a shoe is intended to be an insult. Ahmadinejad is in Egypt on an official visit, and although the official welcome has been warm, many in Egypt are angry over Iran's support for Syria. Protesters gathered in force outside the ancient Al-Hussein Mosque in Cairo as Ahmadinejad visited. The World Bank pledged on Tuesday to help Myanmar access much-needed aid to jumpstart its lagging economy. World Bank officials also promised to help with Myanmar's electricity supply and other basic needs. The World Bank and Asian Development Bank wrote off over $900 million of debts owed by Myanmar. Economists say it'll help kickstart foreign investment in what's been an isolated country. Myanmar's reformist president says his country's recent clearing of billions of dollars of foreign debt is its first step towards ending its least developed nation status. The French Defense Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian says several hundred Islamist militants have been killed since France launched an offensive in Mali last month. He said most had died during airstrikes and in direct combat with French troops, with more killed during ground fighting in Konna at the start of the campaign. So far, there's been one French fatality. A helicopter pilot was killed at the beginning of the operation. France says its forces will start to pull out of Mali next month. British lawmakers have voted in favour of legislation which would allow same-sex couples to marry. The vote caused widespread debate in the country as well as in the country's parliament. British Prime Minister David Cameron said the legislation would end legal discrimination against gay couples. But he faced a sizable rebellion from inside his own Conservative Party. Almost half of his own MPs voted against the bill. But in the end, it passed by a majority of 225 votes after 6 hours of often passionate debate in a packed House of Commons. Family rights campaigners and some religious groups had opposed the law, saying it threatened the traditional definition of marriage. Polls in the UK indicate the majority of the public support it. The Russian city of Sochi is gearing up to welcome the world to the 2014 Winter Olympic Games. The Russian seaside town on the Black Sea coast is undergoing a dramatic renovation, with major building works taking place across the city. The city was once a summer retreat for the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. Most of the sporting venues are being built from scratch on the city's outskirts, but Sochi's organizers are also trying to promote tourism to the city itself ahead of next year's games and to capitalize on curiosity about the former Soviet dictator. Stalin's Black Sea holiday villa, hidden high on a leafy hill, is now a hotel. Guests can even sleep in Stalin's bed before lounging by the pool. But it's not yet clear if people are willing to pay up to $500 a night for that. You're up to date with our top stories so far here on SATV. Don't forget our news at 7 and NewsHour at 10. Stay with SATV.